Okay, so I wanted to talk about the difference between micro trauma and macro trauma. So we'll have a lot of patients that come in and they'll say things like, you know, I don't know how this happened. I didn't do anything. I can't think of anything because we're trying to ask them, hey, what do you think caused this issue, right? If they're having like an ache or a pain or some issue, right, going on with their health, and they're trying to figure it out, and they're like, nah, I can't really think of anything. So then we'll ask them, well, was there any past trauma? Sometimes they'll come up with like the macro trauma answer. They'll say, oh, yeah, that car accident from a long time ago. Yeah, but that was really a long time ago. And I don't know if that makes a difference. It was 10 years ago, 20 years ago. Oh, that bad sports injury. That's right. When I had that really bad sports injury. And now I remember back to that. But that was like college or high school. Or they'll say things like, oh, that slip and that fall. I slipped and I fell. Or that work injury. Or that time, I was roughhousing, whatever it might be. They might think back to that macro trauma event, and that's macro trauma, like the big event that you remember, right? I would say that a lot of times it's the micro trauma. We'll have patients ask me, hey, do you adjust your kids? And I'm like, my kids get adjusted every week. My kids have been adjusted since birth. And we'll ask people, when do you think the first trauma, the first macro trauma might be in your life? And they're trying to think back, and I'm telling them like in utero and birth. In utero is more like that micro trauma than like that confined space. But the birth process, natural or C-section, when people say, oh, is it safe for kids? I'll say, think about the birth process. How aggressive was that? Like, oh my God, yeah, that's true. That was aggressive. This is going to be a lot less, a lot less force than that, right? But that's like macro trauma. But then they'll say, oh, why would you get your kids checked? It's like, well, think about just micro trauma on a day to day. Micro trauma can be, learning how to walk, like boom, boom, that repetitive learning how to walk. Think about your kids. Or think about you. Do you ever sit and like text? Are you in a position with your neck where it's like, this like this, like, face down, like looking at the phone or the iPad or sitting in front of a computer? Or like, now we're in summer, right? Sitting on the beach chair. So those beach chairs, I can't sit on like those low beach chairs. That just crushes me. It's like angled in, you're sitting there. So I have more like, like an upright, like director chair. It's like, action. No, but basically like just for me with my back, I can't sit in that beach chair for a long time. So if you're in one of those chairs that really has you like down where everything's compressed and it compresses those vertebrae, compresses the bones onto the discs, and then you just sit like that for a while, you might not feel it right away. But then people will come in and we're trying to say, hey, what aggravated it, what caused it? And like, oh, I can't think of anything. Going to get the, basically the beach chairs and the bags and the towels and the toys out of the trunk or the back of the car, not being aware of your posture, right? That could be another thing that's maybe, you don't feel it right away, but you do that enough times, it kind of builds up, right? So the micro trauma is like your day to day, whatever you're doing. Whatever it is that you're doing on a day-to-day basis. It could be your position when you're going to change your kid or wash your dishes or do chores at home. You're sweeping. I know if I'm like cleaning, if I'm trying to sweep or I'm in a position trying to clean for a while, standing in a certain position, like kind of leaned over, right? So that's the difference between macro trauma and micro trauma. But you need to realize that stress accumulates, right? So I'm giving you a lot of physical examples. And you can use that with any type of stress. So we're doing our stress and inflammation workshop on Monday night, July 13th. So it's going to be coming up July 13th. And I talk about the three types of stress. So physical, then we got chemical stress. And when it comes to chemical, I'll say to people, do you think there's more toxins in the environment? And they'll just say yes. I kind of keep it like general, but you can think about like your food, like if you're eating anything that maybe has some toxins in it, your water, stuff like that, stuff in your environment. And, people say, oh, you mean like mold? Yeah, it could be mold. Just stuff in the environment, like chemical stress, but it's mostly to do with like the stuff you're putting in your body, like food. But that's accumulated stress. And it's like, people say, oh, so you never eat, something that's not organic. Again, yes, I eat things that are not organic, right? But again, it's accumulated stress. You just got to try to make the better choices, the majority of the time, right? So it's, physical stress, chemical stress. And then emotional stress, I think this one gets us the worst. It's like that, those negative thoughts, like one negative thought's not really going to push you over the edge, but you have a bunch of accumulated negative thoughts that could put you in a stress response, for example. So that's the difference between, and then you can have like the big emotional event. So the difference between micro trauma and macro trauma. Okay, those are just some examples. But then it also goes back to like, why would you get checked and adjusted if you're not feeling symptoms right away? Well, we want to counterbalance it. We want to stay ahead of it is a good way to think about it, but we want to counterbalance the stress, okay? Because you don't always feel everything right away. And that's the hardest thing to get across to people. It's the trickiest part. You just think about health in general. We don't always feel the symptoms right away, all right? So I just wanted to clear that up. All right, have a great day.